circle of police?
Yes.
What was he doing?
He was crying.
The cover-up went on for years. Now it threatens the re-election of the governor. The police say they killed these two men in self-defense. This man who was there says the police captured the two, formed a circle around one of them, and executed him. In the middle of a circle of police?
Yes.
What was he doing?
He was crying.
The cover-up went on for years. Now it threatens the re-election of the governor.
I'm Mike Wallace.
WWL-TV, Channel 4, New Orleans.
Last month, in an unprecedented move, 38 officials of the Justice Department, including members of the FBI, were served subpoenas by the Senate of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. It is part of a continuing Senate investigation of the 1978 deaths of two young men on a hilltop called Cerro Maravilla. The police, Puerto Rico's Justice Department, and the governor claim the two alleged terrorists had been shot by police in self-defense. The Puerto Rican Senate concluded the two had been executed and that the facts in the case had been kept from the public in a massive cover-up by government agencies in Puerto Rico. They also claim that the U.S. Justice Department, including the FBI, went along with the cover-up. The incident at Cerro Maravilla is the major issue in Tuesday's election in Puerto Rico. 23-year-old Arnaldo Rosado and 18-year-old Carlos Soto were the two who were killed. They belonged to a radical group called the Armed Revolutionary Movement, which wanted independence for Puerto Rico rather than the Commonwealth status it has now. Puerto Rico was ceded to the United States following the Spanish-American War. July 25th, 1978 marked the 80th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Puerto Rico. And Soto and Rosado came up here to this mountaintop called Cerro Maravilla, where the transmission towers of a local television station are located. These two crosses mark the area where they lost their lives, killed by police. Within hours, the governor of Puerto Rico praised the policemen as heroes. He would go on to say the two had come up here to blow up the transmission towers and cut off contact with police, the FBI, and other security agencies. He said they had attacked the police, who killed them in self-defense. Carlos Romero Barcelo is the governor of Puerto Rico. Governor, from your standpoint, what's at issue here?
Well, the first thing, Mr. Bradley, was a real tragedy because two terrorists were killed in the act of committing a terrorist act.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when someone is killed in Puerto Rico, there must be an investigation as to why, correct?
Right.
Well, shortly after these two men were killed, you branded the people who killed them as heroes.
So did the newspapers, Mr. Bradley.
Now, I'm not talking about the newspapers. I'm asking you.
Mr. Bradley, but I'm saying, you make it the way you ask the question, so I was the only one who felt they were heroes.
You felt they were heroes, because even before the investigation?
Nobody felt there was a crime, Mr. Bradley, at that time.
But Miguel Marte knew it was a crime and not a shootout, as police claimed. Marte was a technician working at the tower station on Cerro Maravilla. He was there the night before the shooting when police moved in with rifles. From the chatter on their walkie-talkies, he also knew that other policemen were hiding in the woods around the towers. The next day, just after 12 o'clock, Marte was inside the building when he heard a car drive up and then heard a volley of shots. He saw one of the policemen inside with him aim through the window and shoot. Even though the police had warned Marte to stay away from the windows, he took a look outside.
I moved to a window, and I saw on the window about from 5 to 8 agents.
Other policemen?
Yes. And a young guy.
And a young guy.
He was, they were making like a circle. The young guy was inside. He was crying. He got marks on the face.
Marte backed away from the window. He could hear more talking, and a few minutes later, he heard a second round of shots. One of the policemen told him he could go outside. He saw Rosado.
So when I went out, I saw a body. full of holes.
Now, when you looked outside, you saw a young guy.
Yes, very young guy.
Alive?
Yes.
In the middle of a circle of policemen?
Yes.
What was he doing?
He was crying.
But he was alive.
He was alive. He was standing up in the middle of the circle of policemen.
And after that, after you saw him alive, you heard another round of shots?
Yes.
Marte never said a word about what he had seen. Through 4 investigations, 2 by the Justice Department of Puerto Rico and 2 by the U.S. Justice Department, he never spoke out. All of those investigations came to the same conclusion. Rosado and Soto were terrorists who had planned to blow up the communications towers. They had attacked the police, who then killed them in self-defense. Only one person told a different story. Julio Ortiz Molina was the cab driver whose taxi had been taken over by Rosado and Soto, who forced him to drive them to Cerro Maravilla. He told reporters that when they got out of his taxi, there was shooting, but the police took Rosado and Soto alive, beat them, and later shot them to death. He also said a third man had been with them in the taxi, a man who seemed to be the leader since he gave the orders. That third man was Gonzalez Malave, a police undercover agent who had infiltrated the group and led Rosado and Soto to the ambush. This photo of Malave was taken by police just after the shooting. His finger was grazed in the gunfire. But the cab driver's testimony was ignored. Marte, who could have backed him, said nothing.
Before they left to someone, that was about from 5 to 6 in the afternoon, one of the agents that were inside with me, police rifle, AR-16 rifle, and he said, "Look, Marte, remember, nobody shoot from here. I didn't shoot from here. Remember that. Don't you forget it." He told me that.
Not just the police told Marte what to say. He said he was later warned many times by the chief of the Criminal Investigations Division of Puerto Rico's Justice Department.
He told me, "Marte, stick to the same version. One shooting, nobody shoot from the inside." And he told me, if somebody ever tried to change the first thing you said, let us know. We put them or him or her out of circulation. That really scared me more, because look, when the chief of the Justice Department tells you that, what are you going to do?
The U.S. Justice Department was also involved because Puerto Ricans are American citizens. FBI memos, which have recently been made public, made it clear that their agents in Puerto Rico didn't want an investigation because they thought it might embarrass Governor Romero's administration. Other U.S. Justice Department memos wanted an investigation that would include only newspaper reports published in Puerto Rico and a copy of the official report from Puerto Rico's Justice Department. And remember, that was the Justice Department that had ordered Miguel Marte to keep his mouth shut. The Puerto Rican Senate opened an investigation into the killings at Cerro Maravilla, and because of evidence suggesting a cover-up, they wanted advice from an expert. So they hired Sam Dash, who served as counsel to the U.S. Senate during the Watergate hearings.
No question in your mind but that the FBI said, let's not look beyond this wall?
Absolutely, and no question in my mind from the memos they wrote that they were doing it for political reasons, political in the sense that they were trying to support the police they were working with, and they were not willing to do anything that might embarrass that administration. Those were their words.
Marcos Ramirez is chief attorney for the Puerto Rican Senate.
And we really believe, and we can conclude that on the evidence, that both the 2 investigations carried on by the Justice Department of Puerto Rico and the 2 investigations carried on by the Department in
Counsel Sam Dash recommended public hearings, and last fall, 5 years after the killings, the people of Puerto Rico as the Senate, a Puerto Rican policeman, questioned by Chief Investigator Hector Rivera Cruz, testified that Rosado and Soto had been shot on the knee. The police also testified that When they went to Cerro Maravilla, they had been under orders not to let Rosado and Soto come down from that mountain alive. And that later, some of the top officials in Puerto Rico's Justice Department had instructed police to lie during those investigations.
In fact, there was no clear evidence that they were terrorists, and there's no evidence at all that when they went up there, they were going to blow up communications towers. They had no explosives with them, and they couldn't have done it. And perhaps the evidence now indicates they wanted to make a symbolic gesture up on that mountain.
The Puerto Rican Senate hearings established that Rosado and Soto had carried guns. But instead of bombs, their knapsack contained barbecue starters, matches, and these homemade handcuffs. The chief attorney for the Puerto Rican Senate says it took 5 years for the Senate to organize the hearings because obtaining this and other evidence from Governor Romero's administration was extremely difficult.
The executive power, from the beginning, fought legally not to give us any information at all. Not only the documents, but also the objects, like arms and other instruments used in the crime.
Governor Romero denies his administration was difficult and says the Senate investigation was organized entirely by members of the opposition majority party.
I've been trying to get at the truth ever since this happened. But the Senate has been trying to politicize this whole thing ever since this happened.
A little over a week ago, the Puerto Rican Justice Department indicted for murder some of the policemen involved in the Cerro Maravilla shooting. Governor Romero says he wanted the indictments earlier, but the Senate committee withheld evidence.
They haven't allowed us to bring the case to trial or to have the indictments because we're not turning documents and evidence.
Governor, do you ever think that the Senate maybe looks at your Justice Department and says, we don't want to turn over this information, one, because our investigation is not complete, and two, because members of your Justice Department lied before. Members of your Justice Department coach witnesses about telling lies under sworn oath. And that maybe that's why they don't want to turn it over to your Justice Department?
Mr. Bradley, with the fact that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 members of a department may have committed crimes, that is no reason and no valid reason whatsoever to say that the department will not be allowed to do its job. We have to sustain and reinforce our departments and our systems of justice. I'm not trying to obstruct them as they're doing.
But, Governor, these weren't low-level members of the Department of Justice.
Were not.
One was the chief of the Special Investigations, another was the chief of the Division of
Mr. Bradley,
Investigations.
no.
I mean, these are men, Governor, who are lying, who are telling witnesses to lie. Would you want to turn over information to people like
Mr.
that?
Bradley, they're not involved in any investigation now. They have no access to it, Mr. Bradley.
But how do you know who else is in there lying? I mean, this was the action of the Justice Department that... Governor, this was the Justice Department that looked at this case and found no wrongdoing.
Mr. Bradley, you're trying to make people guilty by association.
No, I'm just saying that here's a Justice Department that took a look at Cerro Maravilla more than once and found nothing wrong. So now this is a Justice Department that all of a sudden is going to be on the up and up.
So did the U.S. Justice Department take a look at it, Mr. Bradley, and they didn't find anything.
Based on the information given to them by the Puerto Rican Justice Department.
No, Mr. Bradley, they made their own investigation. They had the grand jury investigation.
The U.S. Justice Department did indict 10 policemen in the shooting of Rosado and Soto, but only after the truth of the killings and the cover-up were disclosed in the Senate hearings. And those indictments were for perjury. No indictments were brought against the Puerto Rican justice officials who had ordered the police to lie, to perjure themselves. The Senate is now in the third phase of its investigation. Senate President Miguel Hernandez Augusto.
You have also taken what seems to be an unprecedented step in subpoenaing members of the U.S. Justice Department.
That is correct.
Why?
Because not only Puerto Rican institutions, Puerto Rican government institutions failed, but also federal government institutions failed. I think it is in the best interest of the Justice Department to find out why the FBI took the position that it took of not carrying out an in-depth investigation. Why, when they decided to investigate, having more resources than we have at the Senate, didn't go to the truth that we were capable of obtaining. Why is it? What happened? What failed? Who failed? And I think the people of Puerto Rico have a right to know. And I think the government of the United States has a responsibility to let the people of Puerto Rico know what happened.
Last week, there was sworn testimony that both the former Secretary of Justice in Puerto Rico and a former top aide to the governor lied to the Senate Investigating Committee. It's expected both will be charged with perjury.
A cada generación toca recoger las cenizas de sus mayores. Estamos cansados de aguantar con paciencia una esclavitud denigrante. Nos da asco la presencia de hombres y mujeres que pretendan asumir autoridad en nuestra patria sin recibir el nombramiento de Puerto Rico. Y estamos en la resolución de desafiar definitivamente toda esa tiranía. Los muñecos que nos pasea por delante el enemigo, algunos nacidos en Puerto Rico, otros nacidos en Yanquilandia, esos muñecos no nos impresionan. Ha llegado un momento, es vuestro momento. Esta generación nuestra tiene un inmenso privilegio, el privilegio de sentirse fastidiada de la esclavitud, el privilegio de desafiar la esclavitud, el privilegio de desafiar la tiranía. ¿Por qué sepultarnos en un mundo de inmundicias, en un mundo de codicias materiales, en un mundo de sobornos, en un mundo de esclavos? ¿Por qué no se levanta ese pueblo a la grandeza que le llamó el padre la patria? ¿Dónde están los grandes de este pueblo? ¿Dónde están las hijas grandes de este pueblo? ¿Dónde están los hombres de Puerto Rico que toleran toda su humillación sobre sus mujeres y sobre sus hijos? ¡Levantaos, puertorriqueños! ¡Levantaos, mujeres de Puerto Rico! ¡Rechazar el cortejo de los cobardes! ¡Esto es nuestro! Aquí están las cenizas de vuestras abuelas. Aquí están las cenizas de vuestros abuelos. ¿Cómo vamos a renunciar a todo nuestro pasado de grandeza? ¿Por cobardía? ¿Cómo vamos a entregar todo nuestro legado de heroísmo y de valor? ¿Cómo vamos a entregar la sabiduría de nuestra raza, la belleza de nuestra raza, la visión eterna de nuestra raza? Nadie tiene ninguna autoridad en Puerto Rico. Ni jueces, ni fiscales, ni policías, ni gobernadores, ni ningún charlatán en Puerto Rico. Nos están desafiando continuamente. Es la hora de la resolución. El momento de intranquilidad del hombre es el momento en que está irresoluto, en que no sabe qué hacer. El valor no necesita de la fuerza física. Y las mujeres nuestras serán las que empujarán los hombres hacia los hombres gloriosos para que han nacido. Las mujeres de Puerto Rico no han parido hombres cobardes. Tienen que ser hombres que sean genuinos héroes para la historia del mundo. Aquí está la ceniza de metal. Aquí está, tiene que estar el corazón de todos los puertorriqueños. Aquí tiene que estar el valor de todos los puertorriqueños. Aquí tiene que estar el heroísmo de todos los puertorriqueños. Aquí tiene que estar lo más grande y noble de la sangre de Puerto Rico. Aquí tiene que estrellarse el despotismo de los Estados Unidos.